Good morning, folks. So here we go on Thursday. We are nearing the last full week of the 2019 2020 school year. What a ride it's been. So, keep in mind, final projects are still due on the 15th. Tests, our ecology test, is coming up next week on the 11th, Thursday. And the week after that, the 17th, less than 2 weeks away now, is our last day of school. All work must be to me by the 16th so that I can get it graded. If you turn it in on the 17th, I will try, but I cannot promise. So please make sure that you're keeping up with that. And without further ado, we started today by taking a look at what Earth looks like at night in a quick video and seeing all those different points of light and kind of just hopefully coming to the realization about the population that that's talking about. We are going to move on now to, well, obviously what is linked to it, urbanization. This is, first we did forest fires, then we did monocultures. Today, urbanization. Um, it encompasses a lot of different topics. They all kind of fit into it because in order to urbanize, we must do these three. We must be deforesting areas because all biomes, at least here and in many other places, would be some form of forest at their climax community. So, in order to have that land, deforestation must take place. We need to mine to get the resources that we need in order to build. You can't make concrete out of rocks. It needs to be very certain kinds of rocks. And of course, whenever you're cutting down trees and you're ripping up the ground, you're going to be engaging in habitat destruction. So, this is what this world would look like without our interventions virtually everywhere. You would have some form of old growth forest for whatever would live in that particular biome. But this is what it looks like now. This is a wildly different landscape. How did we get from forests to something like this? Well, the idea of urbanization is an old one. It's defined as making somewhere more urban. The picture that you see here is a painting that was done of, I believe this was down around, no, you know what? I don't remember where it was. I don't want to give false leads, but this was a city pre industrial revolution. Look at how spread out the buildings are. Look at the amount of land between them. They're not packed in like we saw here. So we've seen a change occur from the past when we were just getting started down the technological road to today. We urbanized. We made things more of a city. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need the land to build. We're going to need the materials to build with. And that's pretty straightforward. One of the less recognized things is we also need fewer species. Because the more animals we have in that area, the more disruptive it is to the way that our cities function. So we actually want to, as far as cities go, to reduce the number of species that can live there. Because we want to streamline things. The only way something this large, with this much population, can work is if they have a whole variety of systems that are all working properly, and you don't want something else messing up that system because that will result in hundreds, thousands, potentially maybe millions of people having some disruption in their life. Case in point, think a little bit about our invasive species and that brown tree snake in Guam. Remember, they do $4 million of electrical repair because that snake crosses power lines and causes them to short out and burn up. That's not what you want in a city. So, In order to get the more land, we are going to go through deforestation and habitat destruction. It's just the easiest way to do it. Now, this is a map of South America, and in particular, this is the Amazon rainforest basin. And if you take a look, this whole area is forested, at least to some degree. Where you see orange, that's deforestation after 2019 due to fire. Where you see purple, which really only appears in the top, that's the 2019 forest fire. Red is other fires that have been set to burn down, and yellow is areas where it's been clear cut. Now, that may not seem that bad, but I want to point out the time scale. This is just in the last 2 years. If you were to take all of those colors, all of those dots, and put them together, it means that about a quarter of the Amazon rainforest has been cleared in the last 2 years. This is the most biodiverse place on Earth. This area has more species than anywhere else on Earth. This area has more potential medicines than anywhere else on Earth. And a quarter of it's been destroyed in 2 years. This is America, several different maps. And basically, what we're looking at here is the green is the amount of forest cover. And you can see from 1620, everything was forested, at least on the eastern half, to 1850, to where we are effectively now after 1920. So when you look outside and you see all these forests, realize the small percentage they actually make up compared to the land that's clear. Over here, the red in the middle, these are for virgin forests. So this is forests that have not seen logging. They haven't been replanted. This is areas that are still pristine. You can see that by effectively 1990, we were basically out of those on the eastern half of the country. And over here is just looking at the northeast, and it's looking at the different forest types that we have. And wherever you see these little boxes, those are areas that have been okayed for logging and clear cutting. So some real big differences everywhere, not just here, not just down in the Amazon. This is the world map. And when you take a look at it, red is loss of forest. The light green is the current forest cover. And the dark green, thankfully, is gaining forest. So we are starting to understand this, and we are replanting large, huge swaths of land. But understand, a tree still takes 100 years to grow. So now, habitat destruction can come from a ton of different things. And obviously, just taking a look at the list here, you can see a huge, huge number of them. Because when we move into an area and we decide to utilize it for something, we very rarely care about what's present. So, this is the Everglades in Florida. And basically, we decided that all of this land, it should be used, it shouldn't be this wasteful swamp. So we drained it. Here is what it looks like today compared to what it used to look like. Huge amount of area that's been drained and destroyed. This is the Hoover Dam in the background, and this is the riverbed of the Colorado River that flows down throughout a lot of the western states all the way down to Mexico. And if you take a look at these rock sides, you can see where the water level used to be. You can see where it is now. This is the Colorado River on the left, 1999, and at this point the Colorado River was not being utilized. By 2013, we had started to divert the waters so that we could use them for local farmlands. And instead, you can now see that where once this was a big river, all the way down until it starts to reach its delta over here, now there's barely a trickle left to go through this otherwise dry landscape. Lake Mead is the reservoir behind the Hoover Dam, created by the Hoover Dam. You can see in the 1980s, the water level was all the way up around these giant turbine towers, all the way up to almost this like top lip area. Now here is the top lip area that I'm kind of tracing over, and you can see that the water level has dropped by 70 to 80 feet. You can see the white lines along the outside here where the water level used to be compared to where it is now. Diverting rivers, lakes, streams in order to utilize that water for other things has major effects. What happened to all the animals that used to live down throughout here and relied on that water for life? Or the additional volume of what this lake would be? Agriculture itself is a huge problem. If you take a look, the color denotes how much land in a given area is devoted strictly to farmland. The darker the green, the more of it that is devoted strictly and only to farmland. And you can see down the middle, we have almost entire states that are literally 80 to 100% agricultural centers. That means huge areas of land that are only being used for a monoculture. We've got situations where we rip through forests in order to run power towers over and through. You guys see these just, hell, looking out the window from the classroom. We could see one of these trails coming up over the hill as power lines were routed over and through the forest. For some organisms, this is a divide that they will not cross. If Mama Bird was over here hunting, but her nest was over here, she will not fly back and forth across this. Those young are dead. They will no longer have anyone to care for them. This is her home now. Similarly with roads. Remember, a geographic isolation is based on the species. To an earthworm, this is an impassable object. We can see even tourism isn't necessarily good. A coral reef should look like this, the top picture. Teeming with life, those bright colors that tell us that the organisms are alive. But thanks to tourists in majorly uh, tourist centric areas like the Bahamas, this is generally what you see. The coral has all been killed off. And with the coral dying, the fish have gone. With the fish leaving, the entire ecosystem falls apart or has to move because this is now the equivalent of an ocean desert. And this is showing exactly what you shouldn't do. Now, most people, when you think about mining to get the materials like the limestone that we need for concrete, like the iron for rebar and reinforcements or manufacturing into steel, whatever it is, let alone if you're talking about something like your cell phone battery. Because if you're not aware, mines don't look like this anymore. We don't go down into the earth in these little tunnels. Now we bring the earth to us. We have unbelievable, gigantic machinery that just chews away the surface of this planet. This is a lithium mine, specifically to produce the lithium batteries in cell phones. This dump truck is not a normal dump truck. This dump truck is about 45 to 50 feet long from the front to the back. It is carrying somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, about 40 tons of dirt and rock. The wheels are 8.5 feet high. The cab in here can seat six. This is an unbelievably massive piece of machinery, and that entire load will produce enough lithium for a single battery. And so we dig out huge portions of this planet and leave these open pit strip mines behind. Here's another one. To put this in perspective, you can see this crane. There's one here. There's another one up here. There's two more here and here, respectively. The boom on this arm, is about half the length of a football field. The main one, which you can't even see going all the way this way, is the size of a football field. This structure itself is unfathomably titanic to give you a scope of how large the cutaway on Earth is here. These are garbage sites, landfills, and other disposal areas. The colors indicate green means that they're closed and healing. Red means that they're open right now and accepting new, I'll use the term, donations. And you can see how much of this country is garbage. Every box that we throw out has to go somewhere. There is no exception. And it doesn't matter if it's recycling either, because ultimately we are finding out that almost 60 to 70% of recycled stuff just goes into a landfill anyway. You put it in the bin for it to be recycled, but that isn't actually what happens with it. And it's resulted in an increase in the amount of garbage that we throw out over the last 2 decades, because it created kind of this false sense of security where people were able to feel good about themselves because I'm recycling. I know I have a lot of waste, but I'm recycling it. But it wasn't ever actually being recycled. We have things like overfishing and overharvesting, and how this can affect the natural ecosystems, removing those food fish or those predators from it, unbalancing everything that's left behind there. And of course, when we do all of this, when we're destroying the habitats, when we're deforesting the land, when we're ripping up the earth, ultimately, ah, it's going to increase the rate of extinction. Now, this graph is showing the extinction of, four major groups. And if you take a look, that dotted black line down at the bottom, that is the background rate of extinction. And basically, what that's saying is that normally there's a certain number of species that are always going extinct. That's normal. That's the way nature is supposed to work. Remember, natural selection is only going to favor those with good adaptations that aided in survival. So, invariably, as always, there are some that don't make it. That's okay. I mean, we may not be happy about it, but that's the balance nature has designed. You can see, though, boy, the extinction rates for a lot of animals are way above that background rate now, especially since the 17 and 1800s. Oh, that coincides with human population increase. Huh, funny. I wonder if those two things are related. And let's say something doesn't go extinct. As you destroy their homes, they have to find new places to live. And those new places that they go to live might be a little bit closer to us than we like. If people found a bear on their property, they probably call wildlife to come and get rid of it, to come and capture it, move it somewhere else, because we don't want biodiversity in our cities. If you guys saw a coyote or a fox wandering around the street, that would probably concern you, because this is not their natural environment. This is not their natural habitat, except it is now. When you don't give them the room that they need to survive, they will try to survive somewhere else. You could always end up with a scenario like this when you look out a window. And I apologize for how grainy it is, but yeah, that's a mountain lion separated by 1/4 inch pane of glass. If that 250-pound killing machine decided it wanted to come into that house, that window is not going to stop it. And it's when predators like this, when dangerous animals like bears now are forced to live with us, that we start to get really upset about things because it's disturbing our comfort. And then from there, humanity does what humanity does. This is a coyote competition where literally they're just competed with other people to go out and shoot as many coyote as they could. And if something like this makes you sick, if something like this makes some part of you say to yourself that that is not right, there has to be a better way. There is. But we need people who are willing to work to make those changes happen. And it has been repeatedly proven that currently the people in power are not willing to make those changes. That's why we tell people to vote. So, not exactly an uplifting thing, but as we're moving up from day to day, we're getting into more and more severe cases. If you take a look in Schoology for today, all the way down here to June 4th, I have included a link to Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. Now, there's a couple of things that I need to say. Number one, I'm not assigning this. It's like a 2 hour long movie. It can it's got some great data, despite the fact it is now almost 20 years old. That doesn't change the validity of the data that's involved. Some things in it are presented incorrectly. We thought it was A, it turned out to be B. There are some things in there that are presented merely to try to get an emotional impact, and they are not science based. Like there's one scene where they talk about polar bears being found drowned for the first time ever. And yes, polar bears were found that were drowned, but it had nothing to do with climate change. So I included it now because I'm going to include it again tomorrow. But because it's such a long thing, I thought maybe if people are interested in watching some of it, that they're going to like to have a little bit of a heads up. To uh, to clarify it, literally the first 15 minutes is easily the most important part. After he gets done with his silly little personal journey thing and he gets into the science of what climate change is, of how we know that it's happening, the evidences that we can use to support it. Tomorrow, we will be going over climate change. We will be talking about global warming, and that's going to extend into Monday as well. Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, we'll be doing kind of a quick brush over to review everything. Thursday next week, we test. Friday, I will have I'll meet with anybody who really needs help in getting that project done before the Monday deadline. And meeting Monday the 15th, we'll have a class kind of like normal. It's going to be a little bit different, but I think it could be good. And then after that, that Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll have class, but it's going to continue to be a little bit different as we hit those last 2 days. So I hope that helps out. If anybody has any questions, concerns, ideas, confusions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll see everybody tomorrow.